What happens when two titans of Formula One like Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton face, but not against their rivals but within the same box? What if I told you that a simple equipment order could have triggered a storm that threatens to break Ferrari from the inside? Azerbaijan. The urban circuit of Baku, famous for its unpredictable finals, became the stage of a break. Not for an accident or for a controversial career decision. It was for something as apparently banal as a team order in the fight for the 8th and 9th place. But right there is the key. It was not the position that mattered, but the beginning. Ferrari ordered an exchange of positions. Hamilton, with cooler tires, had to advance Leclerc to try a final attack on cars that preceded him. Leclerc obeyed, with the understanding that if his partner failed to progress, he would return the position. It was a basic pact, almost manual within Formula One. But Hamilton, already in his second race with Ferrari, did not fulfill his part. He crossed the finish line in front of Leclerc without having managed to advance significant positions, and without returning the place. The difference was less than half a second, and that narrow margin became a deep crack. Beyond the result on the track, what was evident was the fragility of the work environment. In a sport where confidence among teammates can make a difference between collective success and internal implosion, this small break had larger consequences. In Ferrari, not only a promise was broken among pilots, an alarm on the inability of the team to manage two strong personalities was activated when circumstances demanded it. This is especially significant in a season that is emerging as an open struggle between McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes. In that context, where each point is gold and each strategic decision is amplified, the lack of internal coordination or respect can define the outcome of a championship. And in Ferrari, what should be an explosive association in performance began to show signs of being simply explosive. All this leads us to an initial conclusion that is uncomfortable but necessary. The decision to unite Hamilton and Leclerc was not just a sports commitment, it was also a psychological and political experiment. An experiment that, from Baku, has begun to show unexpected and potentially destructive results. To what extent is Ferrari prepared to control this storm that they have created? How much can Leclerc support before he stopped trusting the team that has accompanied him since its inception? And above all, what will be the consequences when an 8th is not at stake but a victory, a pole, or a world championship? Emotions in Formula One are not a luxury. They are a tool, a raw expression of the mood of a pilot who lives every thousandth as if he defined his legacy. And in Baku, Charles Leclerc did not hold. After seeing how Lewis Hamilton failed the tacit agreement to return the position after a failed attempt to overtake, the Monegasque let out what many simply considered frustration of the moment. But when analyzing his words, the context, and the tone in which he said them, it is clear that we are facing something deeper. You can enjoy that P8. It's stupid because it's not fair. That phrase, said by radio, was not just a superficial complaint. It was a sentence full of disappointment, irony, and criticism. Leclerc was not talking only about 8th. He was denouncing disrespect to an internal code, a confidence that, although not written, defines collaboration between teammates. It was a moment that felt an emotional breakdown, where the pilot stopped filtering what he said to protect the team and began to speak with the rawness that only arises when mutual respect feels betrayed. But beyond words, the subtext was even more powerful. The sarcastic tone, almost resigned, revealed that Leclerc did not feel surprised by what happened. As if I had anticipated it. As if he knew that, in this new stage with Hamilton as a partner, the agreements are not worth the same as before. The phrase, "I don't really care," was what most baffled. Because if there is something that has always defined Leclerc is its fierce competitiveness. The fact that he did not care did not indicate indifference, but a way of protecting himself emotionally in the face of a situation in which he feels he can no longer trust. The episode was not limited at the time on the track. In the subsequent press conference, Leclerc did not hesitate to bring the issue to a more institutional plane. It was there that he left an even more powerful statement. There are rules with which we know that we must work, and today perhaps those rules were not respected. Obviously, if we fight for more attractive positions, I hope it is the case, then I hope we work differently. This phrase in diplomatic appearance encloses a veiled threat. It is the type of message that is not thrown into the air. It is aimed at someone. To Hamilton. To engineers. To the equipment address. To all those who allowed this order to occur but not fulfilled. It is a line in the sand. Leclerc is making it clear that it will not allow a situation to be repeated where your interests will be sacrificed without return. That if Ferrari really wants to have a clean and effective struggle for the championship, he must ensure that everyone plays under the same rules. And if they don't, it won't remain silent. This is where the conflict takes a much more complex dimension, because Leclerc is not in its first year. He is not a young man who can be easily molded by the team's hierarchy. He has been 6 seasons with Ferrari. He has lived failures, disappointments, races lost due to bad strategies, and moments where his talent has been bigger than the tools he had. And now, when he feels that the team could finally be in a position to fight, perceive that they are taking away the most important weapon: trust. First, we must address a technical factor that has been officially confirmed by Ferrari after the race. Charles Leclerc suffered a loss of power in his power unit during the final phase of the Grand Prix. Although it may seem a lower loss, about 2 kilowatts according to the team itself, this represents a concrete disadvantage of about 3 kilometers per hour in line, an absolutely critical difference in a circuit like Baku, where long DRS areas are the perfect scenario to define positions. This loss not only committed his ability to attack or defend himself, he also radically modified his options to recover the position against Hamilton in the last turns. The team head, Frédéric Vasseur, was very specific about it. He clarified that the problem was not serious in terms of reliability, but enough to alter the performance of the car in combat conditions. This puts a new variable on the table. Even if Hamilton had wanted to return the position, it is possible that the difference in rhythm and the technical limitations of Leclerc had made the most difficult or even reckless maneuver. Here an even more complicated debate opens. Should a pilot return a position if it compromises security, or if the career conditions have changed substantially since the exchange was agreed? To this is added another key element: Ferrari's strategic management. The team did not give clear signals by radio at the end of the race about whether Hamilton had to return the position. There was no categorical order or a last-minute warning. There was also a direct intervention in the last lap that confirmed that the agreement was still standing. In other words, Ferrari retired from the conflict. He just observed it from the barrier, waiting for the pilots to solve on their own what from the wall should have managed with authority. This omission is not less. A team that aspires to the world title cannot afford ambiguous decisions at key moments, even less when it comes to maintaining equity and cohesion among its pilots. And it is in this context where the figure of Hamilton enters. The 7-time world champion is not a pilot who acts without calculating. Each maneuver, every message, each silence is loaded with strategy. I knew perfectly that the position return was not only a sports issue, but also political. Doing would have been a clear gesture of good faith towards Leclerc. Not doing so, especially when the circumstances were diffuse, it was a decision that assumed with full awareness of its implications. For some, this demonstrates an implacable competitive character. For others, a lack of team vision. But the undeniable thing is that Hamilton, at that time, prioritized his immediate result over the long-term relationship with his partner and with the structure of the team. In summary, to blame Hamilton only would be an unfair simplification. This was a collective failure shared between the Ferrari wall, the interpretation of the pilots, and the changing technical conditions. But the difference lies in how each actor reacted to that ambiguity. Leclerc lived it as a betrayal. Hamilton saw him as an opportunity. And Ferrari, once again, chose not to intervene until the damage was already done. The great challenge for Ferrari's direction is, therefore, political and human. Will they be able to establish clear, equitable, and respected norms by both pilots? Will they have the courage to intervene when necessary, even if that means to contradict one of their champions? Can they recover the confidence of Leclerc and at the same time allow Hamilton to shine without generating resentment? And meanwhile, the season does not stop. McLaren is in charge of the championship with a cohesive structure, with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri yielding to the highest level. Red Bull, despite his internal turbulence and the problems of adapting his new pilots, continues with a Max Verstappen willing to squeeze up to the last thousandth of his car. Mercedes, with consolidated Russell and Antonelli surprising in his debut, is closer to what was expected. In this context, Ferrari cannot afford to waste time solving internal wars. Each race in which they do not act with unity is a lost opportunity to recover ground. What would you do if you were in charge of Ferrari? Would you take sides with one of the pilots? Would you establish new internal standards to avoid more conflicts? Or would you let talent impose without restrictions? And even more important, what do you think it will happen if this tension is not resolved before the following races arrive?